and we see them there in the Oval Office. This follows Mr. Trump's summit. Hold on, well, let's listen to the president.
Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the president of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic, yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format, that after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK and France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO, I mean all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them, and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelenskyy, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelenskyy of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
No, I think that's true. I think they'll. We're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed, and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelenskyy here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards? Right?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be. Look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
And to that point, President Zelenskyy, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. You know that today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes. If the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long term. This is very long term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine, and we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
Mr. President, Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one. A lot of reasons for it, and they'll be talking about it for a long time. But they'll be talking about the others. Look, India, Pakistan. We're talking about the big places. When you look at, you just take a look at some of these wars. You go to Africa and take a look at that. Rwanda and the Congo, Republic of the Congo. That's been going on for 31 years. And so we've done a total of 6, and we really have 6, not including the fact that we obliterated, and it turned out to be a total obliteration, the nuclear, as you said, the future nuclear capability of Iran. And this one, I think we're going to get solved also. I feel confident we're going to get it solved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can you tell us about your conversations with European leaders and what they need to see to support an end to the war?
Yeah, well, we're going to be meeting with a great representative group and 7 very powerful, very big countries and great people, all friends of mine and friends of yours. And we're going to have some suggestions made. They want to see peace. They would like to see peace.
President Trump, when in Russia, you said last
In the
night
red,
that-
in the red.
President Trump, do you think it's fair for Ukraine and for Russia to achieve a lasting and durable peace if Ukraine cedes its territories that Russia hasn't yet conquered? Do you think it's a fair peace for Ukraine?
We're going to have a lasting peace. Just to answer the first part of your question, we're going to have a lasting peace. I hope it's going to be immediately. I hope it doesn't have to go on. And I think people of the whole world is going to be very happy when that's announced. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you posted on social media, Mr. President, a very touching letter from the First Lady, and the letter was hand-delivered to President Putin, and it calls for an end to the war, essentially, because of the children and the children's future. Why did the First Lady feel that letter was necessary? Was it because she believes that Mr. Putin is the aggressor in the war? Is a similar letter being hand-delivered to President Zelenskyy?
So the First Lady felt very strongly. She's watched the same thing that you watch and that I watch. I see things that you don't get to see, and it's horrible. But when she's got a great love of children, she has a wonderful son that she loves, probably more than anybody, including me. I hate to say it, but she loves her son. She loves children. And she hates to see something like this happening, and that goes for other wars too. I mean, she sees the heartbreak, the parents, the funerals that you see on television. Always funerals. We want to see something other than funerals. No, she felt it was a beautiful letter. It was very well received by him, and she did ask me to say, she would love to see this end. She would love to see it end, and she says it very openly, very proudly, and with great sorrow because so many people have been killed.
Mr. President, last week,
Brian, go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
And in the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
Maybe yours is much better than mine. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances. And a little bit, we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe, how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say
we're ready.
during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake
You like
news
this
is.
idea?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal because they've seen they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace?
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say, I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, you know, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. You know, I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know what the one I'm talking about. It was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and you know, this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say, Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just it. And I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so that people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No, it was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. You know, there's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. You know, its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you, it's safe. I had another friend of mine, he has a son who's a great golfer, he's on tour, and he came in 4th yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank
Sir,
you.
I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you can walk around with D.C. with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Yes.
Sir, on the
Mr. President. Last week, you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of
I
your
don't
meeting
think you
with
need a
President Putin?
ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept, you know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
President Zelenskyy, are you
Can
disappointed
you
that there's no
explain the
ceasefire?
decision to offer Ukraine Article 5-like security guarantees, but stop short of pushing for their full membership?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made, but we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today. But we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out all.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Trump.
Are you disappointed there's no
The United
ceasefire, Mr.
States,
President?
the United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, how much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelenskyy, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number is well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years, he was not a smart man 40 years ago either, but now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy, because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this. He was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Mr. President,
You want to
I can. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapon from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Territorial and etc., we have some programs where we can have some money to finance this. And this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important. And it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example. We need it very much, and this is also about defending.
I think the good news, we make the best military equipment in the world by far. You mentioned the Patriots. How good are they?
Yeah, systems.
We have systems, they're literally 100% foolproof. And it's really like shooting two bullets, two bullets hitting each other in the air in a space like this. The chances, 100%. It's 99 to 100%. So we sell the equipment to NATO. And NATO does what, I don't know what the arrangement is that you have with, but I know that they want you to have the equipment. and we're getting the best equipment in the world, but they pay us for the equipment. Under Biden, it was just crazy what was going on. I believe the number is over 300. I think it could be $350 billion worth of equipment and money and everything else. And we've made more progress in settling this war in the last 2 months than they made in 4 years. This should have been settled a long time ago, but it should have never happened. Yeah, please.
Real quickly, you pushed out on social media.
All right, Brian, go first.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well,
that is?
that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad, I hate to take your time in this, but I'm glad you asked me that question.
Sorry.
We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in, they even ask me, they asked me for my license plate, for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders and you need free and fair elections. Those two things, otherwise you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 1, 0, 0, and 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
From President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes 2 parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelenskyy to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we're going to give, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal done.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the president, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the top of the meeting. The meeting hasn't even taken place yet between President Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. A few wrap-up notes before we go to our Nancy quarters at the White House. The tone was much different than the last Oval Office meeting we remember between those two. Volodymyr Zelenskyy heaped praise and thanks on the president. The president said that substantial progress is being made on a possible peace deal to end the Russian invasion, and that he, quote, feels confident we are going to get this solved. Let's go now. He also talked about a trilateral meeting, perhaps, between the three parties. And with respect to the question of security guarantees, we're going to help them out, the president said, about securing Ukraine's security in the wake of some kind of possible agreement. There was also the traditional extraneous information, which we won't get into. But let's turn to Chief White House Correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, your thoughts?
Well, I thought it was notable, John, right at the end of that give and take with reporters, President Trump said that he is going to be speaking with Vladimir Putin right after these meetings wrap up to let him know what was discussed and to talk about a possible trilateral meeting between himself, President Putin, and President Zelenskyy. Also notable, and you nodded to this, the fact that the president seemed very open to providing intense security guarantees to Zelenskyy and Ukraine. He was asked whether the U.S. would send peacekeepers to Ukraine, troops on the ground. He didn't rule it out. He said this is something that's very important to the Europeans and therefore is very important to him in terms of getting this deal done. And the reason that is so important, John, is because one of the greatest fears that Volodymyr Zelenskyy and other European leaders have is that they might cut a deal with Vladimir Putin that might even include territory changing hands, Russia taking control over land that was traditionally part of Ukraine. And then a couple of years later, after Russia has had an opportunity to rearm, Putin might attack again and try to gain more territory. And that's what they're seeking to head off.
That's right. And in the last Oval Office meeting, the one that didn't go so well, that was one of the major points of contention, that Putin had broken the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994, about the future of Ukraine. Then again, the Minsk agreements in 2014, 2015, breaking agreement after agreement. And that's why now this question of whether there can be sufficient guarantees is one they're very suspicious about in Europe and obviously in Ukraine. U.S. Security guarantees would put some metal behind any kind of agreement. Nancy, the White House, the president was obviously disappointed in the coverage they got out of the summit with Vladimir Putin last Friday. What is your understanding of the emerging details and clarity, or not, that we've gotten about really what took place in that meeting and what the sort of strategy is now for the president and his team?
Well, the indications that we got from the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who were both in that meeting with Putin and appeared on various Sunday shows yesterday and are in the room today, is that land swaps are at the heart of this negotiation and the thing that President Trump most wants to discuss today in that room. Territory that would change hands from the Ukrainians to the Russians. And we also know a bit more about what Putin is seeking based on European reporting, and that is that Putin would like to gain control of the entire Donbass region of Ukraine, which is home to 6.5 million people, or at least it was before the war. And he controls roughly 87% of the Donbass right now. It is predominantly Russian speaking. He sees it as part of Russia, but that's not all he wants. He also then wants to freeze the conflict along the current battle lines, meaning that at the end of the day, he would take control of more than 20% of Ukraine. This is obviously something that Ukraine and the Europeans have a major problem with. And even going into this meeting yesterday, President Zelenskyy said he doesn't think that they should be talking territory in this meeting today at the White House. He thinks that's something that should only happen when he is sitting across the table from Vladimir Putin, and once he has assurances that Putin is going to stop the killing, which continues right up to today, John.
Nancy Cordes at the White House. Let's bring in CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams, who is in Kyiv, Ukraine. Holly, picking up on what Nancy said, freezing along current battle lines, the Russians are trying to push those battle lines almost as we speak.
That's right. And I think there's a big difference, John, between freezing front lines, accepting that the Russians are occupying part of Ukraine, and actually handing over territory permanently to Russia. I think the question for Ukrainians is that they want peace. They always say they want peace, but at what cost? A recent poll found that nearly 70% of Ukrainians now want a negotiated peace deal. That's up from just over 20% at the beginning of the invasion. Quite simply, the Ukrainians are exhausted and they've taken hundreds of thousands of casualties. But the devil is really in the details, because some Ukrainians say that handing over swaths of land to Russia permanently, that is redrawing lines on the map, is simply not a price they are willing to pay. And in fact, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said it would be unconstitutional. It would probably also be politically untenable for him, because some here would see it as a capitulation or simply as politically foolish. On top of that, Ukraine and its European allies are fearful that sacrificing Ukrainian territory to Russia would set a dangerous precedent, essentially rewarding Vladimir Putin for invading Ukraine and perhaps encouraging him to do it again. And then finally, even if a deal can be done that's acceptable to all sides, many Ukrainians have told us they simply do not trust Vladimir Putin to stick to his word, because he invaded their country back in 2014 and then he broke international agreements to do it all over again in 2022.
Thank you, Holly. So let me, a couple of things there. Is there, on the question of territory, we haven't even talked about Crimea from 2014. Is there any feeling is there any emerging consensus about what a kind of territorial, where the red lines are, I guess is a way to put it? I mean, the Secretary of State said, Ukraine is going to have to give up something. What would be possibly even tolerable? Is that even possible to know?
I don't know if there is a consensus. As I said, for some Ukrainians, any land swap, so-called land swap, would be unpalatable, unacceptable. Others are exhausted by this war. Perhaps they'd be willing to give up Crimea, that was illegally annexed by Russia back in 2014. But I don't know that at this point there's any consensus, and it's not entirely clear publicly what Ukraine's red lines are.
And then, Holly, you mentioned that nobody trusts Vladimir Putin in Ukraine after a series of broken agreements. That would seem to be hard-won wisdom. But what is the feeling then about the United States? We talk about it in terms of security guarantees. That seems a little abstract. Is there a feeling about whether the United States can be trusted to keep in place any agreement and therefore keep Vladimir Putin from doing what they guess he would do if left to his own devices?
What I would say is that many people here are furious that President Trump has been meeting with Vladimir Putin at all and using that language of land swaps. Some people think it's naive. Other people feel that their country has been sold out by the United States or by President Trump. To give you a flavor of what life is like here in Ukraine at the moment, in the city of Kharkiv, which is to the northeast of here, early this morning, just before sunrise, a swarm of Russian drones hit an apartment building. And Ukrainian officials say that at least 5 people were killed, including a baby girl, a 1-year-old baby girl. In fact, President Zelenskyy just mentioned her at the White House. There's very disturbing video of rescue workers trying to resuscitate her. It's upsetting watching for us. Imagine what it looks like to Ukrainians. To Ukrainians who see that video, it simply doesn't look very much like Vladimir Putin really wants peace.
Right. Holly Williams, Force in Kyiv, Ukraine. Thank you so much, Holly. Joining us now is CBS News national security contributor Samantha Vinograd. Sam, when you take a look at what we've just seen, the president and Volodymyr Zelenskyy, what's your reaction to what we've seen so far?
Well, the two leaders certainly had very different attitudes towards each other in this meeting than in their previous meeting in February. President Trump, for his part, referred to President Zelenskyy as one of the 7 great leaders from Europe during the conversation earlier, versus a somewhat patronizing attitude during the February meeting when he told President Zelenskyy that President Zelenskyy didn't have all the cards. So Trump is certainly speaking to Zelenskyy very differently. Zelenskyy, for his part, certainly has done his homework ahead of this Oval Office meeting. He's dressed differently. He's more formal. He certainly understands how to speak Trump's language. He is thanking the United States for their ongoing support, complimenting U.S. military equipment and assistance. He brought a letter for First Lady Melania Trump, and overall seems to understand how to more productively engage with President Trump. And the goal of that, of course, is to ensure that any deal that is on the table doesn't just reward Vladimir Putin, but is also in Ukraine's best interest, John.
And Sam, as you think about the way this day goes on, what should we expect? They'll have the meeting, then there's another meeting with European leaders. This is being negotiated both behind the scenes, but then also in public. As a White House tries to prepare for this, what's your expectation?
Well, what matters more than what happens publicly is what is happening behind closed doors. And I think there are 2 buckets of issues that are going to be discussed with the Europeans. The first is, of course, the mechanics. Are we looking to try to secure a ceasefire ahead of any kind of peace deal? The benefit of a ceasefire, of course, is that the killing stops and that there is a pause such that the Ukrainians and the Russians can negotiate without more Ukrainians being murdered by Vladimir Putin. The second substantive piece of what's going to be discussed behind closed doors is security guarantees. And John, those security guarantees from the United States, of course, could come in the form of actual U.S. presence on the ground in Ukraine, but it could also come in the form of ongoing U.S. military assistance to Ukraine, intelligence, weapons, and more military equipment, so that the Ukrainian army, once a peace deal hopefully is secured, is viewed as strong and a deterrent to further aggression by Vladimir Putin.
Samantha Vinograd, thank you so much. I want to bring in CBS News Chief Washington analyst Robert Costa. Bob, you've been on the phone talking to the White House. What's your sense of the president's mood, and how do you view what we saw today between the 2 leaders?
Good to be with you, John. Sources close to President Trump tell me he's relaxed today. He wants to cast himself as a peacemaker. He knows the stakes are high, but he also can only do so much to bring these 2 warring powers together, to bring Ukraine and Russia to the table. There is a goal here of having a group meeting with Putin and Zelenskyy at the same table, with the mediator being the president. But there are low expectations inside this administration about What's possible? What are the limits here for Ukraine? And they're going to put pressure, I'm told, on the Europeans to step up, not just in terms of security guarantees and how Europe's going to contribute to that, but how they're going to be a forceful presence for the Ukrainians in the coming years, should there be some kind of agreement. But paramount here, John, inside the White House, is a deal. It's not an ideology. It's not some view of the world. It's getting a deal done. That's animating the president behind the scenes. He wants to be the one who brings these sides together. It's not exactly about how it looks, but just the fact that it could get done.
Do they have any conception, Bob, of what that looks like? In other words, what you're suggesting is, not any abstract ideas, maybe not even the idea that sovereignty of a nation needs to be protected at all costs. But if they have that realistic, clear-eyed view, does that essentially mean at the end of the day, Ukraine is going to have to agree to a lot of land going over to the Russians that they might not otherwise have agreed to? Is there any shape that vision of the world suggests to you?
The president is not playing by the NATO playbook. That doesn't mean he's not aligned with NATO in spirit, but when it comes to this deal, peace, the White House is saying to reporters and others around the administration, is that is the end game here. And if that ends up being Ukraine having to have some concessions, and that could include giving over some land that's been taken over by the Russians to some capacity, if Ukraine gets some kind of security guarantee for the rest of its sovereign territory, that's all part of the discussion.
Chief Washington analyst Robert Costa. Thank you, Bob. We'll be back around 3 or so Eastern when Mr. Trump, President Trump, and Zelenskyy are joined by other European leaders. Our coverage continues on CBS News 24/7 and your local news. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson.